think recently a lot of people have been starting to come to terms with the fact that Dave Ramsey's a little bit out of touch. And before we get too far into the video, let me stop and say, no, he didn't literally give me my first $100,000, but he was a super big influence in how I got there. And yeah, I'll be honest, Dave doesn't always hit the mark on his takes. Sometimes he's honestly out of touch. It seems like his views and opinions about money hasn't really grown with the times. A lot of Americans do struggle to make ends meet, and it doesn't seem like Dave has grown past the mentality that income minus output is somehow going to save you. Sometimes you can't save yourself out of poverty, and I don't think Dave always gets that message. But I'm gonna give you a few reasons why I think Dave is still worth listening to, and honestly, it's helped me to make a lot of money and save a lot of money. So I'm gonna paint the picture. Let's go back a little bit. Probably about 6 or 7 years ago, I got my first professional internship. Well, it wasn't really my first internship, but it was the one where I got paid enough to where I could actually do something with money. At the time, I'm a college student, I still live at home, and I was making something like 21 bucks an hour, and I was working like a general office, cubicle style job, nothing too fancy. And since this cubicle had walls, I was like, all right, well, if I'm gonna, be in Excel all day working, I might as well do something I enjoy. So I wanted to listen to podcasts, and that's when I stumbled upon Dave. Now, Dave's whole ethos or his vibe is kind of like a jerk, right? He's a really tough love kind of guy. He's gonna tell you how it is. And for me, being 22 and knowing nothing about money, I appreciated the forwardness. My family didn't necessarily grow up in a lot of money. We weren't the worst off, but we definitely weren't talking about saving and investing. So I just appreciated him starting the conversation. And I think a lot of people can resonate with the fact that he almost sparks a sense of urgency in you. Like, oh my goodness, I need to do this now. I have to get my family out of debt. I have to do something. And I appreciated it. But let's get to how he actually made me $100,000. If you listen to Dave's podcast, he often will talk about his financial advisor network. Now, I don't like to be sold things, so I was never gonna pick one of his financial advisors. But my calculus teacher from high school, her husband was a financial advisor. And I was like, okay, maybe I should try and look into it. So I did. And my guy, Scott, he sat me down and he was like, yeah, everything's Dave's saying, it has some merit to it. You should really start learning to save. Now, the issue was at the time, I needed $5,000 to even be a client. And I didn't have that. Scott actually put me on a plan and said, hey, every time you get paid, I got paid weekly at the time. It was $1,000 a week. He said, what you're gonna do is you're gonna send me $500. I'm gonna put it in a basic savings account for you. And in 10 weeks, when you hit the 5,000, we'll start an account for you. Now, those 10 weeks went by really quickly. And one of the immediate things I got to see was that, wow, okay, I can actually save. I can put aside money. Now, obviously, I was in a situation where I could because I lived at home, was young, and didn't have a lot of obligations or expenses. But the point remains, it showed me the power of saving. And that started with Dave. And I was like, okay, this guy's right. If you live under your means, you can definitely do a little bit of something with your extra income. It's a wealth building tool. And those habits stuck with me over the year. The idea that I should be saving first and spending last. And so as my income went up little by little, I would always save first and say, okay, I don't need to change anything just yet. I don't need to change anything just yet. In fact, it took me a year to move out of my parents' house. And that's because I was in that hyper-focused mindset of I need to save. And before I knew it, I was funding a Roth IRA fully every year. It was maybe $113 at the time every week. And so I put the money aside and I sent it to Scott and say, hey, Scott, we're gonna do a Roth IRA. And slowly we started doing a savings account, and then that grew to a brokerage account. And then we started getting into 401k savings and making sure that all of my matches were being taken advantage of. It was something like 8%, which hurt. Don't get me wrong, saving the money hurt. But I started to see the progress. It was small. It was very small. Like that first $5,000 was difficult. The next $10,000 was even harder. And I feel like it took me a lifetime to get to 20,000. But as you see returns in the market, as you see your balance growing, it kind of adds encouragement to go a little harder. And when I had friends who also graduated in engineering, some of them would buy new cars, and don't get me wrong, I wanted a new car too. In fact, I eventually got a new car, but it helped me hold off, right? It helped me delay gratification, which I think is a really, really big part of wealth building. All of that to say, it did take me a long time to get to that first $100,000. I actually think it took me about 2 years. And this is 2 years of intense saving. This is me when I did move out of my parents' house. I had 2 roommates. It was a $1,700 3-bedroom apartment, not in a great part of town, not in a terrible part of town, but it was an okay apartment. We split rent. My half was like $625, I think, and the other two paid $550. But you get the point. The principle that Dave preaches is live under your means. And I think that was a lot easier to do 5 or 6 years ago, which I don't necessarily think is as easy to do today. But as a principle, it still holds true. And as my career has gone on and I've continued to make a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, I always keep Uncle Dave's harsh words in my head. Now, I could also go and make another 10-minute video on all the things Dave has said that I don't agree with. Again, I don't think buying a house in this economy makes sense. Even for someone with an extremely high income, you start looking at the numbers and it's like, this isn't desirable. And if it's not desirable for someone who makes a lot of money, then it's absolutely not affordable for someone who makes less. So all in all, I think you do have to pick and choose what you take away from Dave. But I think he still has the right sentiment that a lot of the times we do need to cut back on certain things and we do have to struggle in order to get to new financial goals and milestones. That's gonna look different for everyone. Some people are used to nicer things in life. Some people have bigger obligations and responsibilities. But at the end of the day, you do have to find a way to find the balance between what you're willing to spend and what you're willing to save. If you made it this far, I'd love for you to drop a comment and let me know, what do you think about Dave Ramsey? He's been around for a long time. He obviously has a huge network of influencers who talk about this kind of stuff all the time, and I don't always agree with them, but I would like to know opinions. Am I the only one who feels like their advice is still good at a baseline, but not for everyone? And while you're leaving a comment, don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed the conversation, if you enjoyed the content, and let me know what else you'd like to hear.